the bros who get it, calling all bros to the front. Here's a little survival guide for men in the age of misogyny, because we don't want men to just be surviving. We want you guys to be thriving. And the patriarchy is not letting you do that, babes. Hate to be the bearer of bad news. Welcome back to Stay at Home Feminist. Your soft girl or boy era starts here along with the fall of the patriarchy. I'm Binx, your favorite feminist with a TikTok addiction. And today we're doing something that I don't normally do. I'm dedicating an entire episode to the boys. Yeah, I said it. This one goes out to the men who aren't screaming about women making them sandwiches and or the great replacement theory, but who also don't quite know where they fit in a world that feels like it's constantly saying men are trash. And for the many men and boys who I'm sure are new here, one of the pillars of this show is the understanding that the patriarchy is bad for everybody. And yes, that means men too. All right, men, time to get real. The patriarchy is screwing you over. And feminism might actually be the survival guide you have been waiting for. So this episode was actually inspired by talking to a man IRL. I was in the real world. I was at a party. I was talking to this man I just met, and I don't know how we got here, but basically, I think he asked what kind of content I make. I said like feminist, this and that, da da da. He was like, sorry to rub you the wrong way, but I'm not a feminist. I let him finish his sentence because, my knee-jerk reaction was to like get up and be like, boo, bye. But I was like, let me hear what he has to say. And he was like, I'm not a feminist. And then basically proceeded to explain to me how he is, in fact, a feminist. And I think, feminism kind of has like a branding issue, especially with men, where they hear feminism and they think it's like women who hate men and like want to turn men into their submissive slaves. I think men would actually like that. I think if we look at the like men in leadership in these ICE raids and how they love to be soldiers and stuff, like they love people telling them what to do. They love being submissive. That's a different story for a different day. But anyways, this man proceeds to explain to me that he is in fact a feminist. And I'm like, I hate to break it to you, babe. You are an ally. You are a feminist man. And he was sort of like, yeah, I guess I am. And I was like, what makes you scared of that label? And he was sort of like, I guess I just like wouldn't want to like offend women by saying a feminist. And then I'm like, not. And like, wouldn't want you think I was just like saying that just like to get on your good side kind of thing. And was like, he basically was like, I guess I just didn't know what feminism was. So I proceeded to basically talk about a lot of the concepts I'm going to talk about in this episode with him and explore like the way that patriarchy is hard for men. And he opened up about like how it has been hard to express himself in certain ways. And yeah, it was a really sweet, fun conversation with a man, a white cis man. And then later on in the party, he was like on the phone with his wife. And I walked past him and he was like, I'm talking to my wife. I'm telling her that I'm a feminist. And I was like, yeah, girl, he's a radical feminist. And he was like, radical feminist, babe. And it was like really pure and really sweet. And I think I often interact, other than like my husband, my brother, my dad, like men that are like, like my loved ones in my life, I often don't interact with like random men like that. And the random men I am interacting with are like the incels that come out of like the dark, damp quarters of the internet to like troll me on my post. And I realized for me, it's really created this bias of like men are so annoying because the men in my comment section are so annoying. They're like all with their whataboutisms and they're like incel logic that doesn't track and just being super hateful. And I'm just like, ew, gross. I don't want anything to do with you guys. But this man made me realize, or helped me like touch grass a little bit being out in the real world, that like men are not all like the men in my comment section on the internet. Men on the internet can be very, very, very not cute. But men in the real world, I think a lot of them are trying. I guess this one goes out to the men who like haven't been radicalized yet because the internet is trying. I've talked about it in other episodes, how algorithms are specifically working to pull men into the alt-right pipeline. So men, I know I talk my shit, but I'm here for you too. And honestly, like my brand of feminism really wants everyone to be thriving. And I think it's very clear that men are not. I think we can tell by like the mentee bees they be having in public. Like, it's embarrassing, you know? I'm embarrassed for you. Why do you need to buy up and go to an elementary school or a synagogue or a church or a grocery store? Like, you're weird for that because some bros on the internet made you think that was like fun to be an incel. Like, okay. Anyways, trying not to talk shit this episode and be welcoming. Because men are lonely and I want to help you be less lonely, because I think loneliness is sort of like the root of all evil for men right now. I think they're really in a lonely time where they're struggling to relate, and some may even call it the male loneliness epidemic. And if you've joined me before, I've done a podcast on this and talked about the ways that it's just very interesting that men seem to be locked in a cage that they helped create, which is the patriarchy. But, you know, it's not all men's fault that the patriarchy is here. Let's help them dismantle their inner internalized misogyny, their inner patriarchy, just like we do here every week. Men, welcome to the chat. Welcome to the chat. Help me help you. Okay? And hey, by the way, if you're a man on the internet who doesn't want to hear this, you can just scroll. No one's forcing you to listen to this. You do not have to write some rage bait comments in this comment section. You really don't, babe. You have free will. Since 1990, the number of men who have reported zero close friendships have gone from 3% of men to 15%. So men are having a tough time making friends. Men are twice as likely as women to describe themselves as chronically lonely, and loneliness is bad for your health. There are numerous studies. I remember reading one that said like being super lonely is equivalent to smoking like 10 or 15, I can't remember what it was, like cigarettes a day or something like that, where it's like not good for your health to be chronically lonely in this way. Think about it. Like, you don't have a support system. You don't have like help emotionally, physically, mentally, like for anything, you know, that sort of thing. And I think men are a lot lonelier than women because men are taught by the patriarchy, like to be lone wolves, like to not need anybody, to be like tough, strong man who can do whatever he wants. And like men are with that being denied being a full human. Like, it's normal to have a full wide range of emotions. And I feel like men are being asked not to express all of their emotions in a healthy way. For example, sadness, tears, stuff like that. The patriarchy has taught men to believe that emotions are weakness, that being vulnerable is shameful. And like, if having emotions and being vulnerable is like everything you stand against, like, of course it's going to be tough to make meaningful friendships, to have meaningful, deep relationships, because you need that like emotional depth, or you need that vulnerability to like form deep relationships. And we see when men don't have good friendships, they often rely exclusively on women. So, you know, their girlfriends, their wives, but like sometimes their moms, their sisters, for emotional support. And when those relationships collapse, they feel isolated, you know, and or like look at the rise of the incels, like these men who are struggling to make friends with men if they feel insecure or rejected by women, or maybe they don't have a supportive mom, or, you know, don't feel like they can get a girlfriend, like breeding ground for incels. If the way that men are able to access their vulnerability and emotions is by being with a woman, and you're the type of man who feels like you don't even want to go anywhere near a woman, yeah, it's getting real incel-y real fast. I feel like bros are always told like bros before hoes, but they're not actually taught how to be there for their bros. So they end up trauma dumping on their girlfriends or in podcast comment sections of women. Hello. Which is why half of you are in my comments right now. Hi, welcome. Take a seat, you know, let me be here for you guys. I know you came here to troll, but like maybe you could learn something. I feel sad for men who are lonely. I think anyone being lonely is sad. I do sort of think it's, again, kind of this like cage that men have like built themselves and put themselves in and then like thrown away the key. And I think they really do need to prioritize finding ways to have deep friendships. I do think having a healthy relationship is a great way to explore vulnerability and emotions and like feeling safe. And I feel like relationships can be such good mirrors for people. They can really help you grow if you're willing to. So I'd love to get into some tips for the lonely bros, okay? You don't have to be alone. Dating women is a lot easier when you don't hate them. So let's start there. Do you even like women? Because if not, maybe you should try dating people who aren't women. Just have a little think about it. I do think a lot of men don't realize how much they don't like women. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably not going to be in a happy, healthy relationship with women if you like don't like women. So I feel like that's obvious, but society's conditioned you to just like use them as trophies and have them as arm candy anyways. So like maybe take a little journal about that. But for men who like women and want to date women, here are some dating tips for you. First and foremost, unwire that patriarchy conditioning, because emotional availability is hot, okay? If you want a successful relationship, if you want to be successful in dating, you got to be emotionally available, and not in like a love bombing red flag way, in like a sincere, I got a good head on my shoulders kind of way. Don't feel like opening up will scare women away. And if it does scare them away, like that's not the right woman for you, you know? One great way to be emotionally available is like thinking about how you communicate. I think communication without ego will really, really take you a long way. How do you communicate without ego? I mean, first and foremost, drop the defensiveness. You always, you never, those kinds of phrases, just like put them on the wayside and learn to own your mistakes. And also like one thing I love to remind myself is that if someone is coming to me with a problem, like something I'm doing that's bothering them, most people like don't want to be confrontational. So if someone is going out of your way to explain how something you are doing is hurting their feelings or making them feel like some type of way, it's because they care about you. So if someone comes to you and they're like, hey, X, Y, and Z bothered me, instead of being defensive and doubling down and like being like, well, this is why I was right, or I only did that because you, like, take a breath and be like, wow, how nice that this person is sharing their feelings with me. It's because they care. Even if they aren't maybe the most positive feelings, like being able to hear someone out and take accountability for how you made them feel, intentional or not, like that will get you places. I think a part of that is like having some sort of sense of healthy masculinity. The patriarchy shoves like toxic masculinity down men's throats. Like, let's normalize healthy masculinity. And I do think a lot of healthy masculinity looks like accountability, being able to say, oh, I made a mistake, being able to say, oh, I messed up, being able to say like, I misinterpreted the situation or whatever, I could have communicated better or whatever the thing is. That's power, not weakness. And the flip side of that is like gaslighting and stonewalling are not signs of strength. Those are major red flags. And they're huge signs of insecurity. If you can't sit there and like be able to be radically accountable for your part in a conflict or the way you're showing up in the world, that shows that you're insecure. So let's work on that healthy masculinity muscle. I feel like the best way you can do that is trying to show up like radically accountable. And honestly, I think about the people in my life, like male or female, like this is not defined by gender, who I have the most like open-ended conflicts with because they will not like own their part. You know, I think every conflict, each people bring something to it, unless you're in like an abusive relationship. But like generally speaking, like maybe it's not 50-50, maybe it's like 20-80, 40-60, 50-50, whatever. But like people each bring a part to it. And if you can't own your part, it's so much harder to move forward. And I have people in my life who like, they will not own their part in a conflict. Like no matter what, they would rather not talk to me for years. They would rather lose the relationship than say like, I also contributed to this. And the older I get, the more I'm like, oh wow, I really can't have meaningful relationships with people who don't know how to be accountable for their actions. And instead of apologizing, I find that people who struggle to be accountable, it's like, again, the other side of that is like sort of this like stonewall and gaslighting energy. And instead of being accountable, they often say like, oh no, I'm not sorry for the way I acted. And not only was it appropriate that I acted that way, I did it because you're so horrible. So it's like this double like 1-2 punch where it's like, not only can this person not be accountable, they also have to sort of villainize me to dig their heels in with that like defensiveness, if that makes sense. And that is so toxic. And I think if people could just practice radical accountability, like people could have deeper relationships. And I think, again, that like toxic behavior, part of it is emotional immaturity. If you grew up with parents or you were like role models, like sort of showed you at a young age, like they didn't apologize, they didn't talk about their feelings. Like if you grew up with a parent who never said, I'm sorry, like it makes sense that you might really struggle to say, I'm sorry. If you grew up in a household or just kind of society in general is always like making it very like bad to be wrong. Like what if we got okay with being wrong, you know? And I think that's the insecurity part of it. If you're so insecure, if you're so unsure of who you are, and someone holds up a mirror that says, hey, you're not perfect, and you're like, you freak out about it. Like, it comes from this like deep well of insecurity that you can't just own your flaws. No one's perfect. No one shows up perfectly all the time, you know, and that's okay. I think everyone makes mistakes, and that's fine. When you can't admit that you're capable of making mistakes, you have a reason for everything you did, and you know, you have to defend it, and you can't just sit there and be like, oh, wow. Okay, I see how I did that. Oh, wow, that's not what I was trying to do. I see how I did that. Or, oh, okay, yeah, you know, I did do that. And it was a defense mechanism, but I can work on that because like I care about this relationship. There's just a lot of different ways to think about it. And I think it's very, very normal for people, like we don't talk about that sort of part of emotional regulation or like emotional intelligence and awareness. And I think there's so many like things online about people being narcissists or gaslighting and these things thrown around. And it's like, yeah, it doesn't necessarily make them a narcissist, but it does make them kind of toxic, and at the very least, very emotionally immature. And all that to say is like, women don't want to be with people who are emotionally immature. So don't be. Thanks. I hope that helps. I don't know why I said thanks. Hope that helps. In conclusion, secure men can admit they were wrong. Secure people can admit they were wrong. I think a lot of men, because they haven't found places where they feel safe, they get a female partner, they start dating a woman, and they kind of make her like their therapist, their maid sometimes, their kind of mom figure. It's like a lot. They're receptionist, whatever. Like women do so much emotional labor in relationships. So I feel like a part of that is because men don't know how to have super vulnerable relationships outside of like their wife or their girlfriend or whatever. So I guess my next dating tip is like outsource some of your emotional weight, you know, like you shouldn't put your entire mental health load on your girlfriend. Like get a therapist, just journal, you know, like there's ways that you can process your emotions that isn't with your significant other. I think it's great to process your emotions with your significant other and let them know how you're feeling and like sharing your feelings. That's great. We love to see that. I love going to therapy. And one of my favorite things about that and or journaling, which I feel like is also very therapeutic for me, is like I get to know my thoughts in this safe container. And then when I go talk to, you know, like my husband, my family member, my friend, it's like I've already sort of processed the raw emotion of how I'm feeling about something. And now when I'm talking to this person, it's not because I need them to help or I need anything from them. It's just because I'm like, hey, I want to share with you something about me. And I feel like that creates such a safe space to learn about each other, share feelings when it's not like they're your therapist. And obviously like my husband has been my my therapist in ways, you know, obviously when I'm going through something, he's like right there in my corner with me. And I think that's important too. But it is good to have multiple places to put your emotions and not just all on your significant other. And because men have been taught that emotions and vulnerability and stuff like that is bad, they often don't rely on other people, other methods to process their own emotions and just sort of dump them all into this like first safe space they've ever found, seemingly. And I think a part of that is like understanding your significant other's autonomy and really respecting that. I think for me personally, like when I see, like before I met my husband when I was dating, after a few rocky relationships, I was like, oh, now I know what red flags to look for. And one is like a man who doesn't respect my autonomy. And unfortunately, I think it's really normal for men not to view women as like complete people. I mean, we've seen it in so much like in media and film, like these one-dimensional female characters. I love the age of TV we're in now where there's like real, fully thought out women, like realized women in shows. Like White Lotus is like such a good example of that. I've been watching Ballard. I don't know if anyone's watched it. It's on Amazon Prime. I love it. It's like a cop show. I love a good little like cop show like that. But the lead is a woman. And I feel like cop shows are normally sort of like men are the leads in the show. And then like maybe there's like women's side characters. And it's so funny because she has this like love interest and he is so one-dimensional. And my husband, who's a writer, like always laughs when the husband comes on screen. And I'm like, I kind of love it because like, yeah, that's all we need from him. And that's what they've been doing to like female characters for years. So if you're watching Ballard, you know what I mean. But anyways, women are full realized people. They aren't just an extension of you. So you got to respect the autonomy, respect her boundaries, respect her goals, respect her friendships outside of the relationship. Like if you don't know how to do that, if you have a hard time doing that, you might be toxic. And you should go to therapy. Back to my first point, or my earlier point. Your partner isn't supposed to complete you. They're supposed to complement you. I feel like the best relationships I know are people who stand firmly on their own 2 feet individually. And yeah, they don't complete each other. They complement each other. They make each other better. And it's so nice to see. And, you know, I think one thing that people don't say about relationships, especially like long-term, like marriage, like the person you're going to marry, or like building up to a relationship with marriage, is like life can be so hard sometimes. Like since I've been married, I've gone through some really, really dark times. And I've been so thankful to have my husband there for me, because I'm like, I don't know what I would do if I had to go through this on my own. Like I'm a person, I'd get through it. That's life. But it's just been so tough. And being able to have someone in my corner who just like backs me 100%, who's just there for me. And it's like, I don't feel, making me kind of emotional talking about it. I don't feel like a pressure to be 100% again, because I've been knocked down and I need some time to like get back up and be myself. And my husband is just there in my corner. Like, I'm here for you. There's not a time limit on me being here for you. There's not like a constraint of any sort. He is just unconditionally there for me. And like, that's the type of love I want everyone to have. And I think it is hard for certain relationships to have that because of the patriarchy. Men can sometimes just view women of like what they can do for them. So when your girlfriend, your wife is like down bad, men are a little bit like, ugh, this isn't what I signed up for. And, you know, there's a lot in life you're not going to sign up for. Shit gets real quick. Who do you want in your corner? And what type of person do you want to be in someone else's corner? And if you don't want to be there for someone when shit is fucking horrible, maybe you should stay single. Maybe you should think about that. And I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying about like understanding and respecting women's autonomy as a man. Like that is actually the bedrock of a good foundation of a relationship, because there's going to be times where like I'm showing up 10% in this relationship, my husband's showing up 90, and there's going to be times where it's vice versa. And there's going to be times where it's 50-50. Like life ebbs and flows. And if you are just sitting there being like, we have to be 50-50 and everything needs to be equal all the time, like you are just playing tit for tat with someone, and that isn't healthy. And I think sometimes in relationships, if like one partner is down bad and that's the partner that you feel like should sort of be like the secretary and the housekeeper and the therapist of the relationship, you're going to be feeling real like not knowing what to do. So I think if you start this foundation already, she's not there to help you. You are a team. Everything will be better in your relationship, even the really, really hard and difficult times. And I think a part of that is having friendships that go beyond your Xbox, having men that you can rely on, that you can reach out to and have some sort of external support outside your relationship. Call your male friends. Let them know you appreciate them. Call them to check up. Call them to like check in, whatever, you know, even if it feels weird, like do it anyways. The first couple of times it might feel weird, but then you'll get in a groove. And there's so many guys that I talk to who are like, oh, I would love to call this friend, but I just don't, because we haven't. So you know what I mean? Like, because they're not in the habit of it. Speaking of emotional labor, I think one of my best dating tips for men would be to actively listen when you are on a date, or when your girlfriend is talking to you, or when your wife is talking to you. Like, listen like you mean it. Don't just listen waiting for your next turn to talk. Actually hear her. Studies show that women do the majority of emotional labor in heterosexual relationships. So what could this emotional labor look like? Listening, remembering details, checking in. So lighten the load, like listen more, remember details more, check in about things she's shared or talked to you about. Like when she says she's had a stressful day, don't respond with like same, you know, ask her about it. Care. I think reciprocity goes a really long way in relationships. And the patriarchy has sort of told men like their value is being the breadwinner in the workplace. So like you don't need to contribute in equal ways, like because you just go and work and do that thing. But like now a lot of women are working too. So what else are you going to do to help out, my man? And even if you were the breadwinner and your wife is a stay-at-home wife, stay-at-home mom, whatever, like this still applies, because you having a job doesn't mean you shouldn't also be like a hands-on dad and or husband or whatever. If you live together, doing housework isn't helping out. It's being an adult. Like doing your own laundry or taking out the trash or whatever it is, like you doing that isn't like, oh, I'll help my wife out. Like you live there too. That's just being an adult. And research has shown couples who split chores equitably have more satisfying relationships and better sex lives, which makes sense because I feel like if a woman in the relationship is so busy taking care of everything, she's not going to really be in the mood like that, you know, because she's got so much to think about, so much to do. But if you help out with the load, for more free time for activities, guys, come on. So yeah, those are just some of my dating tips, starting really basic for men who just feel intimidated or don't know where to start. Yeah, that's a good place for you because we don't want you to be lonely, guys. We don't. And women want to date good men, but they just don't want to settle right now. So you can learn how to be a great man. I'm sure you have it in you. We just need to peel back the layers of some of that patriarchal conditioning. And in case you aren't clocked into what I was talking about, let's get into how the patriarchy is bad for men. One of the ways the patriarchy is bad for men is that it asks them to make work their identity. Men are told that their worth is tied to their paycheck. And I think that leaves men in a very confused spot where they really, really put so much emphasis on being the provider, and it sort of stifles them for being well-rounded. Someone with hobbies, someone with friends, someone with something outside of like their career and their provider role. And I mean, I think there are a lot of ways that we can see that men are having a hard time right now. And I think a lot of that comes back to the fact that men, again, they aren't really allowed to be like these well-rounded, full individuals with the way that the patriarchy asks them to show up in the world. And there's like a self-unaliving crisis happening with men. Men die by unaliving themselves at almost 4 times the rate as women. White men in particular accounted for 68.13% of all self-unalivings in 2023. And I really don't think that's because men are weaker. I think it's because they're told that seeking help makes them weak. So they have a hard time dealing with hard emotions, reaching out for help about mental health. And I think that's also why we see a lot of men who are part of mass unalivings, particularly with pew-pews. 89% of mass are men. Let's be clear, hypermasculinity isn't just lonely, it's lethal. When men lose grip without a safety net of emotions, we've seen misogyny become a fuel for like real life horror stories. We've seen this with people like Elliot Rodger, who literally wrote a manifesto blaming feminism for ruining his life. He was so enraged for being rejected, he went on an unaliving spree. And there's even a name for this kind of real world violence. It's called misogynist terrorism. And it's not a mental illness, as a lot of these white men, or as a lot of these men, normally it's like, why did they do that? Oh, mental illness. No, it's not just that. It's part of a bigger picture because incel rage and female targeted violence don't happen in a vacuum. Experts at the Anti-Defamation League point to a broader extremist web in the manosphere. If you don't know what the manosphere is, it's online spaces full of misogynists and grievance-driven language that often radicalize men into violence. In the manosphere, there's this crossover between white supremacy, extremism, and the patriarchy that's been lethal. Take Peyton Gendron, the Buffalo supermarket shooter in 2022. He wrote an 180-page manifesto where he preached the Great Replacement conspiracy. He blamed non-white people for G-side against white people, which is not a real thing, guys. And he worshipped other shooters and had like hate symbols and hate speech all over his own pew-pews. Like, this wasn't a mental breakdown. This was political terror. This was extremism. Research shows that mass shooters are overwhelmingly men, and they are almost always motivated by misogyny or radicalized online by the manosphere. We have a whole online world teaching men that instead of being accountable for their own issues and life, all of their pain is because women got too much power, or Black people, immigrants, Indigenous people, whoever are making strides in this world. And they think that all of their own personal issues are because of that. So when they call it mental illness, like that's not really what's going on. The real trigger for a lot of these mass unalivings is entitlement mixed with misogyny, mixed with racism. That's not craziness. That's not mental illness. That's the patriarchy in action. And I think it's a really scary time to be a young man on the internet, because like red pilling is happening so casually, and it's leading boys and men down a very, very dark road. Red pillers want you to think that like dominating women and treating them like objects is like gonna help you live a fulfilled life. It's not. Studies show that men who hold hostile, sexist beliefs report lower relationship satisfaction and higher divorce rates. I don't think that's surprising. Like if you don't, this is what I was talking about in the beginning of the podcast. If you don't like women and you marry a woman, you're not going to be very happy with said woman. If 1 + 1 is 2 and 2 + 2 is 4. What we don't talk about enough is that feminism might be men's cheat code for living a happy, love-filled, sex-filled, fulfilling life with fulfilling relationships. But the manosphere doesn't want you to know that. No, they want you to think that women are your enemy, that feminism is your enemy, that matriarchal values is your enemy, when it's not. It's not at all. Misogyny is destroying intimacy. When men hold sexist beliefs like thinking women are too emotional or women are only valuable for birthing children, that's not building trust. That's not building solid relationships. That's like building power dynamics, and that builds distance, not intimacy. It's simple when you think about it, because it is really hard to have intimacy and trust if you secretly resent or belittle your partner. Think of it this way. You can't expect to always view your girlfriend as irrational and then expect her to like keep opening up to you when you're minimizing her feelings. And that's because real intimacy requires mutual respect. And I think this emotional shutdown is what is really the like crux of men being so lonely today. And I think the manosphere capitalizes on that and then makes them even more lonely and hostile. The patriarchy teaches men to suppress their feelings, but relationships thrive on communication and expressing your feelings, which is why it shouldn't surprise us that research shows men who avoid vulnerability are more likely to experience isolation, depression, and lower relationship satisfaction. Conversely, research shows that essentially being respectful leads to better sex. Maybe I should have started the podcast off with that sentiment, because men, wake up. Being respectful leads to better sex, okay? Studies show that couples with egalitarian values like shared decision-making, mutual respect, equitable household labor report higher sexual satisfaction. And it makes sense when you think about it. When women feel respected outside of the bedroom, they're more likely to feel safe, confident, and connected inside of the bedroom. So I guess if you have one takeaway, it's that patriarchal entitlement kills desire. Women aren't turned on by being treated like your maid or your mom or your whoever. They want to be respected. All that to say is the patriarchy really makes men miserable too. I fear that men are just so busy blaming women, they don't realize that like the patriarchy is bad for both of us and it's bad for you. And we're trying to get this patriarchal boot off our neck. And if we did, your life would be better too. Everyone's winning. Misogyny convinces men that dominance equals happiness. But in reality, it leaves them lonelier, angrier, and often divorced. Meanwhile, men who embrace feminist values like empathy, respect, and equality actually report higher relationship satisfaction, better mental health, and stronger partnerships. The patriarchy tricks men into thinking equality is a threat when it could be the secret to them living the life they want. Meanwhile, men are listening to guys like Andrew Tate, who was literally arrested for human trafficking, and having them as their role model, and then confused about why they are struggling to have meaningful relationships with women. It's because of toxic masculinity. So don't be toxically masculine. Practice being healthfully masculine. Healthy masculinity looks like intimacy, actual friendships, and partners who choose you, not fear you. Listen, fellas, if your dating advice comes from a guy like broadcasting from a Romanian jail, maybe that's not the life path you want to put yourself on. Men, instead, embrace being a feminist. Call yourself a feminist. Studies show that 57% of men agree with gender equality values, but they don't identify as feminists. And I think that's because they don't understand what feminism is. So let's bust some myths. Feminism isn't anti-men. Feminism is anti-patriarchy. And spoiler alert, the patriarchy is also wrecking men's lives. It's why male self-unaliving rates are higher, why men are less likely to go to therapy, and why men's life expectancy is dropping. Another thing we hear a lot is that like feminist men are weak, they're betas, they're cunts. But research shows that feminist men are living happier lives. They're having healthier relationships. Feminism is joy. Feminism is freedom. And identifying as a feminist man should empower you. And I feel like these labels do matter. Words have power. And when men shy away from being called a feminist, it keeps feminism stigmatized, as if supporting equality is like radical or embarrassing. Claiming the label normalizes it, especially for younger men who are still figuring out what kind of partner, what kind of friend, what kind of father, what kind of man they want to be. And we have the whole manosphere telling them to do the opposite. So if you believe in consent and equal pay and not being a walking red flag, congrats, babe, you're a feminist. Don't let the brand scare you. We've got snacks. So to all my big, tough, strong men out there, let's access your soft boy energy. Inside all of us, gender aside, there's like always softness. And I think we just need help sometimes getting connected to that part of us, especially in a world that prioritizes toughness, in a world that ridicules you for being vulnerable, in a world that rewards you for being big and strong and da-da-da-da-da. So how can you connect to your soft energy? I think an easy way to start is call a male friend just to check in, just to shoot the shit, just to chat, just to be a friend. No agenda, no needing anything, just call to hang. Another way is to share housework without being asked to, because you're not helping out. You're cleaning up after yourself, and that is just being an adult. Another way is going to therapy. Please go to therapy. Yeah, it's like a gym for your brain and for your heart and for your soul. And skipping it makes you lopsided and weird. So go to therapy. Big tip for men who want to break out of the manosphere and the hostile chains of the patriarchy: diversify your feed. Follow feminist creators. I'm not just saying that to shamefully plug myself, but follow feminist creators, follow queer voices, follow women who aren't thirst traps, read books written by women, watch shows that center women. And just remember, you are allowed to feel, you are allowed to care. Your worth isn't how much you can dominate or own someone or be an alpha. It's how much you can connect and uplift and experience joy. And also, for the women listening to this episode, like, help the men in your lives. Help them with some of these tools. You know, I think we are the ones who need to shepherd them out of the dark corners of the internet and into this day and age, and not like medieval times that they're trying to take us back to. In conclusion, the patriarchy trapped you, the red pillars lied to you, and feminism is your way out. The patriarchy doesn't want you to be happy. It wants you to be useful. But feminism, we want you alive and loved and free. Thank you so much for joining this week's episode, especially if you are a man. Welcome to your feminist journey, babe. Hope to see you next week, no matter what your gender is. As always, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you thought about this episode. Any questions you'd like me to answer in the future, any topics you'd like me to dive into a little bit more, let me know. Mwah.